Okay.
Hey, how in the world are you? I'm glad you're with us today and ready for another Outlaws and Legends Behind the Music podcast. Hey, we're going to do some good talking today about a good guy.
Welcome to Kilroy's Outlaws and Legends Behind the Music with your host, multi-award-winning music producer, Eddie Kilroy. And now, here's your host, Eddie Kilroy.
The good guy that I'm talking about is a guy by the name of Carl Smith. For those of you that don't remember Carl Smith, you should remember Carl Smith. My gosh, he was one of the greatest country acts that ever lived. Spent years on the Grand Ole Opry, years touring and what have you, and became my friend, my pal, Carl Smith. Carl started in the music business when he was pretty young. He started messing with the guitar, played a lot of radio shows back in those days. He did the Ozark Jubilee with Red Foley, which was a big deal. And then he went in the Army. And after he got out of the Army, he said, you know, this Hut 2.3678 Hut marching stuff, whatever they do in the Army, which is a good thing, but he preferred his guitar and his music. So he picked his guitar up, and he made friends with a guy by the name of Lefty Frizzell. And Lefty, oh my gosh, was he a superstar? In his day in country music, Lefty Frizzell was just as popular as Elvis Presley in his day, okay? So he became friends with Lefty, and Lefty said, Carl, man, you sing good. You're an entertainer. You need to go to Nashville, Tennessee. And well, Lefty's encouragement, and Lefty put the word out in Nashville, hey, there's a guy coming up that's awfully good. His name is Carl Smith. Y'all better pay attention to this boy because he is going to be good. Well, he knocked around Nashville a little bit, but in 1950, he was invited to join the Grand Ole Opry. Now, let me tell you at this time about the Opry. People use that, artists use it, to book off of. In other words, you see a poster, Carl Smith, Farron Young, Webb Pierce, it didn't matter who they were, and underneath it would say stars of the Grand Ole Opry. Well, people would book these acts as stars of the Grand Ole Opry. The hook was, it was a low-paying job. They could pay, like $35 a show. They do 2 shows a night, maybe $25. It wasn't very much.
I thought you said it was 35.
35, probably 35, yeah.
You said that.
And they would be losing money because they wanted them to work every Friday and every Saturday night on the Grand Ole Opry for $35 a night, whereas they could be booking on the road at a club or a venue for maybe $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, depending how big they were, maybe $5,000. So that didn't work out, and a lot of them left the Opry. I don't think Carl left until 57. But he pulled out because of that, and he was very, very busy. The interesting part on Carl, too.
Let's back up a minute. Yeah, back up. So you're telling me that these people, of course, that was way before my time.
I know that.
And I did not know prior to my 22 years with you who Carl Smith was. So
what a guy. Now you know.
But these people are going to give up their Saturdays and Friday nights to go play on Grand Ole Opry for $35?
Yep, and they all pulled out. But
that doesn't make a lot of sense.
No, it didn't. But Carl had gained something through his recording career when he became 30 top 10 records, 6 or 7 number 1 records, including a couple I'll get back to. I'll tell you right now. One was I Overlooked an Orchid when she went number 1. Wow, did I love that song?
Right over your right shoulder.
I love that song because I told Mickey Gilley when I was producing Mickey Gilley, we've got to cut this Carl Smith song, I Overlooked an Orchid, and we did, and it went to number 1 in the nation. Boom, made Carl a lot of money, made me some money, made Gilley a ton of money. But Carl had written that, and it was a great song, but he was hot with a lot of other songs, his top 10 songs. He had 30 of them, like I said. Well, when he was on the road, back in his heyday, when he had all those hits, he was working all these dates all over the United States. And, he'd be off on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, because Friday, Saturdays, and Sundays, sometimes on an outdoor concert, were their big money times. But the rest of the time, he would go home. And you know what he did for a hobby? He rented a bulldozer if I'm not mistaken, he told me it was a D8, which is a big bulldozer. And he had 500 acres on the outskirts of Franklin, Tennessee. And he would spend 2 or 3 or 4 days pushing trees down. It was all treed hills. And every week he would start putting that bulldozer out there, pushing those trees up, putting piles of trees up, burning them. And after years, he had 500 acres of the prettiest land in Williamson County, Tennessee. And of course, through the years, he sowed it with the beautiful grass, built an incredible barn, an arena to work his horses in, a beautiful home. And it was a showplace. It really is. Sadly enough, right now, since he died, it's a subdivision. I drove by it one year, and when I was up there, and I thought, oh my God, his facility is now a subdivision.
Subdivision Sam?
Subdivision Sam, yeah. Subdivision Sam out there mowing his grass at 7 o'clock in the morning when we're trying to get some sleep. I lived through that one time in my life for about 30 minutes. But, Carl was a super guy. He was married to June Carter of the famous Carter family, and they had one child, Carleen Carter. And she started recording, and you probably remember her.
Wait a minute, Carleen Carter?
Carleen Carter.
But that wasn't his last name.
No, his last name was Smith. But
Okay.
she just abandoned that, and she wanted to be Carleen Carter Cash.
Wait a minute, you're jumping you're getting the buggy ahead of the horse here.
Tell me about it.
You just said he married June Carter of the Carter family.
Right.
Okay. So,
Oh, she married Johnny Cash.
okay.
Right.
You left the big chunk
I'm
out
sorry.
there.
That is a big part because
Because she had to divorce.
Yeah, I know.
She had to get a divorce before she could get married. So she got a divorce.
I did not see that in the divorce column of the Franklin paper, which is right next to the obituaries, which actually, when you get a
That's
divorce
where it
in the
should be?
obituaries.
It should be in the
Yeah, they
obituaries?
should be merged, the obituaries and
All
the
right,
marriages
so-
together. But they didn't anyway. Going on with the story I'm talking
So they
about.
got a divorce.
Yep, they got a divorce.
And
they were married for about 5 years.
I thought you were going to say 5 minutes.
No, about 5 minutes, yeah. But June...
So they had a child.
had a child.
A lady, a girl.
June Carter
And then they divorced, and she married
Cash.
Johnny Cash, which
Yeah.
we all know how you feel about Johnny Cash.
Just because I don't like John, never liked him, and because he was a jerk, doesn't mean that I didn't like him. Well, it kind of means I didn't like him. He was too weird a cat, and Cash was one weird cat.
So she married Johnny
Cash, right.
And the child took the name,
Of Cash.
abandoned Carl Smith,
Right.
and took up the name of Johnny
Why would
Cash.
she do that?
Well, that would hurt Carl's
I'm sure he did.
feelings.
And Carl had...
I think I'd left her out of my will.
Babe, if you want to go online and look at some pictures of Carl, I'm sure there are a bunch of them online. You Google them, whatever you do. He had...
They might Yahoo it.
Anybody would know that I like ladies. That's why I have you. But I can say Carl Smith had the bluest, brightest eyes of any man you'd want to see. And his daughter had the same blue eyes, and she looked like Carl. So how in the world can she have blue eyes, look like Carl, and take the name Cash? I don't know. But nevertheless, Carl ended up better off for it because he married a wonderful, wonderful lady named Goldie Hill, who also was on the Opry. They had a couple of duets together, and they had children together, and a wonderful family. And I always loved Goldie. Carl would call me and say, "What are you doing tomorrow?" I'd say, "Well, I've got a session to do, Carl." He said, "Well, what day are you open this week?" And I said, "I don't know. Let me check my calendar," which I was putting on a show because basically the calendar was blank. But I wanted him to think I was a very busy cowboy. And I'd find out. I said, "Oh, yeah, Thursday will work." He said, "Come on over and let Goldie cook breakfast for us, and we'll gather up the heifers, bring them down to the arena, and we'll do some horse cutting, okay?" And I would do that, and we would talk, and we'd have the great visits, and we would be riding out on that 500 acres and gathering up some cattle to bring them back to the barn. And I was asking Carl, I said, "Carl, do you ever work? Do you ever go on the road anymore?" And he said, "Kilroy, occasionally. He said, I have my price so high that only a fool would pay the money to see me that I'm asking. But every now and then a fool comes along and puts that money up and I go out and work for him. But answer is absolutely very little. And he said, there's a magazine that a lot of you may be familiar with. If you're not familiar with it, you've heard about it, called Billboard Magazine. That is the premier magazine of the record industry. It gives you all the news, and it has the charts, the top 100, and both in country, R&B, whatever you want to look up there. And Carl said, I haven't even seen a Billboard magazine in 5 years or so. In other words, when Carl quit working, he quit country music. It was over. He had his income coming in from his previous record sales, his publishing and writing, like on Overlooking Orchid. He made, $20,000 off that, and he had many more. But he was just a wonderful guy. I can't say enough about him. His son, Carl Jr., I ran onto him about, 20 years ago in Franklin, Tennessee. You know what he was doing? He's a professional dog handler for the Franklin, Tennessee Police Department.
Can he sing?
I don't know if Carl Jr. could sing or not, but if he did, it went to the dogs.
That's not nice.
He handled those. He handled those.
Some of the songs that he made. He had how many number in the top 10?
Oh, my gosh. 30? Yeah, he had 30.
30 in the top 10?
30 in the top 10, but he had some really big ones, too, like Let's Live a Little Before We Say Goodbye. That was a big one. And his biggest one was Let Old Mother Nature Take Its Way. That was a big record. That went number one. He had a lot of great songs, a lot of hits. I was playing one earlier today that I really liked. It was Doggone My Soul, I Love Them Old Songs. And I recorded that on Mickey Gilly. Gilly and I, it's on a Gilly album. Maybe that one, I'm not sure.
Gilly Smoking.
Yeah,
Probably.
Gilly Smoking. But they had the son they had, Carl. They had 4 kids, I think. No, erase that, please. 3 kids with Goldie Hill. And Goldie was Tommy Jackson's sister. Tommy Jackson was the premier fiddle player in all of Nashville in his era, which would have been up through the 70s. And let me say this about Tommy. His fiddle was so endeared to country music that Mel Tillis ended up with it. And Mel had a house fire. And when I got to Nashville, like a lot of people, I was hard up for money, and I sold Mel Tillis a Martin D26 guitar. And then years go by, and I've got a little bit of money. And I said, Carl, I'd like to buy back that guitar I sold you years ago. And he said, okay, Kilroy, you could buy it back, or I would give it back to you, but it burned up in the fire. And he said, but Tommy Jackson's fiddle too, which is telling me, I don't care about your guitar, but I sure hated to lose Tommy Jackson's fiddle.
That was bad.
That was bad, but...
a lot of history lost there.
Oh, yeah. It was on so many records. If you heard a Hank Williams record or any record recorded in Nashville from the 50s, 60s, 70s, into the 80s before Tommy died, it was Tommy Jackson on a fiddle if you hear one of those old country records. But getting back to Carl, he was a gentleman. As a matter of fact, they called him the country gentleman. And he was different than some of the country acts that come up. Gosh, this is delicate, okay? I don't know how to put it, but as you guys watch our podcast, you will find out that I will tell you the truth. And sometimes the truth is not necessary. But I want you to look at some of the faces of country music stars. Not all of them, no. Some of them, okay? You'll find them to be, Liz, how do I say this kindly? Not homely, that's too hard. Hard to look at? No?
Yeah, hard to look
Hard to look at people, okay? Carl was a handsome guy. He really was. And the ladies liked him, and that didn't hurt any. He got a lot of TV exposure, but mostly it was his demeanor. He was always calm. He was always a nice guy. Treated his horses great, and was serious about cutting. And that kind of amazed me because he was born in Tennessee, which was not like the cowboy capital of the world. They were the horse of choice was the Tennessee walking horses. And I mean, they have huge shows up there in the World Championship show and everything. Carl was drawn into the American Quarter Horse, which were fit for cutting. And he got really interested in cutting, started going to Buster Welch's school, seminars, whatever you want to call it, down in Gainesville, Texas, to learn how to be a cutter. Well, after about 2 or 3 trips down there, hell, he could cut a cow. He really could. Carl was good. But he kept going down to Buster's place. And I said one day we were riding, I said, why do you keep going down to Buster's? You're pretty handy right now, because he'd already gone down and won the Futurity, which is the world champion deal, Carl did, in Fort Worth. And he said, because I just enjoy being around people that love horses. But Carl, like many stars, Gilly for one, loves people and loves horses. And I was going to tell you about Conway. No, I don't want to talk about Conway now. That's another story. Boy, is that a story. We'll hold it back. But
Wait a minute. There's something you forgot to mention.
What is it?
All right. June Carter married Johnny Cash. Wasn't there a story in there about Carl and Johnny?
Yeah, that was funny.
How people said things about him, and that's not true.
People talked. Somebody, some idiot, wrote an article. I happened to run across that article and said Johnny Cash and Carl Smith were big-time drinking buddies. I'll tell you the truth. I knew them both. There is no way that Carl Smith was Johnny Cash's drinking buddy. Matter of fact, we were
I don't think they liked each other, did they?
Well, no, they were like 180 degrees apart. Cash was a weird cat, and Carl was just a good country boy that loved his horses and his country music, and he loved his wife and his family, and he loves Goldie's smoked country ham, or was it salt cured? I can't remember, but it was really good ham. But
it was what cured?
Is that salt? They cured?
I thought you said hog cured.
No, not hog cured. Hog was dead. No, I was.
Well, there's salt cured, there's smoke cured, there's all kinds of different ones.
Carl and I were at a CMA, Country Music Association banquet, and it was had a little bar set up there, and you had to go over here to this other little bar set up there, a table, and buy some tickets like you were going to go to a movie. And each one of those was good for a drink. So you buy, if you've been a drinker, you buy 3 or 4, 5, 10. I've saw a couple of friends buy about 50 of them. That's a lot of drinking. But
I'm sure they were giving them out.
I know. We went to, we were over at the bar getting ready to get a drink, because I was not a heavy drinker, neither was Carl. And Cash walks up. Now remember, he married June Carter after she and Carl got a divorce. And Cash says, "Hey, Carl, how you doing?" Carl looked at him just straight in the eye. He said, "You should know you've been cashing my alimony checks." Cash didn't say a word. He just kind of walked off. But I could tell you a lot of stories. I don't know if Cash was a big a jerk as he was, just totally weird cat. I mean, weird. To fit in with the country people that walk the streets. Because in Nashville, and I've said this before, you could go down there on 16th Avenue. That was before it was referred to as Music Row. And that's where everybody hung out, and that's where all the offices of the publishers and the record companies. And you'd see everybody that had, we didn't even call them stars. We called them people that had hits, You'd see Lefty Brazil walking around the road. You'd see Charlie Rich. You'd see whomever, and they just wave. It was all just people, and that's what a lot of my friends that aren't in the music industry think. Every one of the stars that you see, whether they're a good guy or they're a bad guy or a lady you don't like, a lady you do like, they are just like you. They just do something else for a living. They are in the music industry. There's carpentry, there's plumbers. Everybody has their own job. Their job is providing music and hoping you like it. And I loved every minute that I had in Nashville, Tennessee. I would not take the brain full of memories.
I don't know about that. I've heard some tales from you, but that wasn't so much fun.
Well,
You had some people that were, let's say, trying to get produced. We won't mention names, but they were quite trying.
Quite trying to get produced.
Yes, because they couldn't sing.
Oh, they couldn't sing. That's right.
And you had to make them sound good.
Yep, had to make them sound
that
good.
was kind of trying.
Yeah, that would. Oh, should I tell the Gary Stewart and Dean Dillon?
That would again be over your right shoulder.
Yeah. I did an album, RCA Records called me. I've been doing Gary Stewart as a single act and Dean Dillon as a single act. So Jerry Bradley was president of RCA, good guy, great guy. And he called one day and he said, Kilroy, I would like for you to consider doing a duet on Dean Dillon and Gary Stewart since you're producing them both. Well, I thought a moment and I said, boy, this is going to be a tough job. So I quoted him a pretty high price, really, above normal, because I really was not that excited about going in with these two guys. Dean, one of the greatest writers that's ever lived, but he couldn't sing. Gary, soulful singer, but had some emotional problems and what have you. And I won't hold that against him because I like Gary Stewart. But I said, yeah, I'll do it. He agreed to the price. So I went in and we gathered up some really good songs. A few Dean wrote, and I think Gary may have written some of those. And we went in and we laid the music tracks down. The records are all done in segments, kind of stacked up. You do the music track, then you come back and you do the vocal overdubs or any other instrument that you want to overdub. And your next step is bringing in the harmony singers. Well, we laid down all the music tracks, and they were really good. The singer's really not singing at that time. He's just kind of humming along, da-da-da-da-da, just to kind of give the musicians an idea of where they are on the song. But as far as singing, no. The next day you come in, and they start singing. Well, I came in, had it set for the next morning at 10 o'clock, and I come into the studio, and Gary was on. Well, first of all, let me back up. I'm not telling any secrets, okay? The world knows about the problems that both these guys had. And Gary was on the couch in the control room, and I have no idea of what he was taking, okay? But he was just in la-la land. Somebody told me it was heroin. Don't know that for sure. Don't know it for sure, hearsay. But he was on something that prohibited him from functioning properly. Dean was tooting on cocaine, and he was scratching walls like a cat. I mean, he looked like a cat going him down those walls. And I said, boys, listen to me. We will not do any vocal overdubs today. Tomorrow, you guys get on the same drug. Because you can't let it sing together when one's passed out on the couch, the other on the wall. And you come back. Well, they came back the next day on the same drug, whatever it was, they could function. And we did the vocal overdubs. And I said, you do some harmonies? Oh, yeah, Kilroy, doggone right, we can do harmonies. Because you're supposed to do harmonies on maybe going into the chorus in different parts of the song, along with the lead vocal singing on the verses. We went into that, and I swear to you, I love animals. I'd never put a cat in a sack and throw them in the river, but I imagine it sounded like, it really did, sound like a bag full of cats screeching. And I said, whoa, look at this. And I kind of soft-pedaled it with them. I didn't want to hurt them. It did sound like those cats. Anyhow, I said, some way or another, I tactfully told them that was good, that's good, okay, boys, y'all go home. And I never did, it sounds too hard to say I wouldn't let them or prohibited them. I always kind of encouraged the singers not to be in the studio when I was mixing and putting everything together. So I was a guy by the name of Larry Keith, who was a harmony singer that could sing every part, the third part, the lows, everything. He could sing it all, a great talented guy. He could also timbre his voice to kind of sound like somebody else. So I called Keith and I said, Larry, I said, I've got a chore for you.
Is it Larry or is it Keith?
Larry Keith.
Oh.
And I said, Larry, would you come in? I want to do you harmonies, just to do the harmonies on this album. And he came in and I said, it's Dean Dillon and Gary Stewart. neither one of them are in tune, and I need you to do the harmonies. So he did, and he sang 3 different parts on each one of them, on each cut. And they were beautiful, wonderful. It's Larry Keith doing this. And I finished mixing it and everything, and I called the boys, Dean and Gary, and I said, okay, your album is finished. They were albums in those days, okay? That was before CDs. And I said, come on, listen to it, see if you like it. They sat down beside the console. Engineer punches button, tape comes on. Boy, their faces light up. Oh, man, they're grooving. The harmony parts come on. And Dean Dillon said, Kilroy, I told you we could sing those harmonies. Listen to them. Heck, it wasn't even them singing.
Did you ever tell them?
Never, ever told them they weren't singing it.
Well, I doubt very seriously.
But I was a bit overweight then. I was 250 pounds, probably. I tried to keep my weight around 235, 240. But I was probably 250 pounds. They weighed 125 pounds apiece. At the end of that album, they had made half a man out of me. I mean, they had sapped me dry. I was a shell of a man from producing these 2 little guys, but it was successful. And
Let's get back to Carl. Let's finish up with Carl.
I'll tell you what, Carl was so nice. I don't have too many stories on Carl. He was so nice. No, Carl went on. Unfortunately, Carl went to with the great musicians that we had lost before. We lost Carl in 2010. And it was a sad day for country music, as it's been for so many. I was in the industry so long, and Liz reminds me that I lose all my friends now. I've been losing them recently for the last 10, 15 years, because I was always the youngest in the bunch. I was the youngest guy to go to Nashville, and I fell in with all the people up there, and they were all like maybe 10 years older than me, maybe 5, 10, some even older. So it's kind of natural that they would be leaving before God called me home. But I do miss a lot of them, and I was telling somebody that in my phone, where the contacts are, every artist that I had the number on that's gone on, their number's still there. And Liz asked me one time, why do you keep Lefty's number in there and Carl's and all these people that have passed on? I said, so I will never, ever forget them, because every time I look at my contacts, their name comes up, so they'll never leave my phone. But I hope you enjoyed what we did today. I enjoy being with you, and I want to tell you something. We got to saddle up and drift. Hey, somebody bring up old paint for me, will you? Thank you, sir. We're getting on, and I want you to tune in for the next one. But right now, we're riding off into the sunset. I want to say God bless all of you out there, and I want to ask you for one more favor. Subscribe, please. That will really help this podcast, help me, and help me bring stories to you that have been lost for years. God bless you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Kilroy's Outlaws and Legends Behind the Music. If you have any thoughts or questions about the content, email them. Kilroy Outlaws and Legends, all one word, at yahoo.com. That's Kilroy, no S, Outlaws and Legends, all one word, at yahoo.com. And don't forget to subscribe. Third-party use of any part of this podcast without the expressed consent of Eddie Kilroy is prohibited. The Kilroy's Outlaws and Legends Behind the Music podcast is a production of Eddie Kilroy.